I'm so grateful that God did not put us on this planet to do life by ourselves, to try to figure things out, make choices and decisions on our own, but rather God gives us insight, teaches us, gives us wisdom to help us make wise choices so that we can have productive lives and hopefully enjoyable lives and make less mistakes. We're studying through the book of Proverbs, 31 chapters. There's a chapter a day. And today I want to highlight a few verses from chapter 14 and chapter 15. In chapters 14 and 15, we again see Solomon teaching and coming back through some familiar principles about wisdom. In Proverbs 14, verse 1, he says, "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down." That we see that, again, wisdom is actually helping us build a house, that our life is building something. At the end of our life, we look back and hopefully we can see that we have contributed and built something with our life, and that it has impacted not only us, but our family, our friends, and that we've left a good legacy. That when we see our life building something, wisdom is going to help us build the right kind of house. And you think about a house, maybe we should call it a home, because there's a difference between a house and a home. A home is a safe place. It's a haven. It's a place that brings you comfort. It's a place that brings you peace. And wisdom will help us not only build a house, but really build a home. There is a difference between a house and a home. You may have a beautiful house, but is it a home? A house becomes a home when you create the right kind of environment, culture. And our lives are building not just external things, but really internal things that impact our soul and spirit, and a peace of mind, our attitudes, our beliefs, the culture that we're developing around us. And wisdom helps us not only have a home that brings us comfort, but really a home that provides the right culture. And wisdom will help us build the right culture that will actually produce something. But it is the foolish that he says will tear it down brick by brick. Like, foolishness will not overwhelm you or overtake you or destroy your life in an instance, but it will happen moment by moment, brick by brick. One bad choice after another bad choice, a bad perspective, a bad attitude, jealousy, envy, strife, all of those things. If we leave those things in our life, pride, it's going to tear it down brick by brick. And whatever we're trying to build with our life and whatever wisdom wants to build with our life, pride and foolishness will tear it down. He says in verses 2 and 3, "Whoever fears the Lord walks uprightly, but those who despise him are devious in their ways. A fool's mouth lashes out with pride, but the lips of the wise protect them." That we see that when we live honestly, that we are showing respect to God, that we're honoring the Lord with our lives when we live in an honest way, that when we live upright and we desire to do the right thing, that we're actually bringing honor to God. In verse 6, he says, "The mocker seeks wisdom and finds none, but knowledge comes easily to the discerning." There's something about how wisdom promotes us to be discerning with our lives, to be discerning in every moment that's happening around us. Like to be able to know give us insight that cynics portray to be wise. The cynical, the scoffers, the mockers, they portray to be wise, but they will never discover wisdom. And only those who are open-minded and willing to learn and want to grow will they be able to find and discover wisdom for the life. In verse 7, he says, "Stay away from a fool, for you will not find knowledge on their lips." Again, this is coming back to what he said in chapter 9, that we are to don't befriend a fool. Don't try to be companions with him, because a foolish person is living their life with a certain belief system. They see life in a certain way, perspective, and it's the wrong way. It's a foolish way. And when we bring them in, listen, the power of companionship, the power of influence, eventually those negative insights, those negative beliefs, negative perspectives is going to rub off on you. So he says, stay away from fools, from cynics, from mockers. Stay away from them. Don't waste your words on them. In verse 8, he says, "The wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways, but the folly of fools is deception." That living your life in wisdom will keep your life on track. That's going to keep you steady, on course. but it is the foolish living that you're going to find your life in a ditch. You're going to drive off in the ditch and you're going to be stuck. You're going to be limited. You're going to be frustrated in life. I see a theme in verses 9, 11, 12, and 13. He says, fools mock at making amends for sin, but goodwill is found among the upright. Verse 11, the house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. And there is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. And even in laughter the heart may ache, and rejoicing may end in grief. He says in verse 9 that fools will make fun of making amends for wrong or sin. Like there are people who will make fun of you for apologizing, or make fun of you for staying away from gossip. Hey, we shouldn't be talking about this person, and they will make fun of it. They will mock it. Like this is a foolish thing. And he says, stay away from these mockers, foolish people who will make you feel bad for wanting to do the right thing. In verses 11 through 13, he says, a person who is living their life carelessly, like they're not even considering whether it's right or wrong. They're having fun, enjoying life, and it may look like on the surface that their life is successful, but he says eventually their life is going to look like a rundown shack. But however, it's the godly living right, will allow our lives to flourish. And he says that the path to hell is foolish, and living without the fear of the Lord is a foolish way to live your life. In verses 16 and verses 26 through 27, we see another theme here that he says, the wise fear the Lord and shun evil, but a fool is hot-headed and yet feels secure. And he says, whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress. For their children, it will be a refuge. And the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. We see this theme of fearing the Lord, and we'll see it again in chapter 15, that I believe he's highlighting how fearing the Lord will help us to stay away from evil. Like it's going to give you the ability to shun evil. David says, I will hide your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. Like there is a level of respect and honoring God to consider my ways, to consider my choices, and consider my perspective on life. The fear of the Lord will actually give us some level of protection, and it is passed on to our children, that the fear of the Lord is the fountain of life, that it produces life in us and turning a person from the snares of death. In verse 34, that this kind of living actually not only benefits our family, but he says the righteousness exalts a nation, but sin condemns any people. That our world, wonder if we put more emphasis on helping people understand how to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, if we put more emphasis on helping people to understand God's word and living in the fear of the Lord, how that would actually help our nation be what it needs to be. Not only just passing laws and legislation, but it's the fear of the Lord. It's the righteous living. The righteousness will exalt a nation. And if we would work on our own individual lives, are we truly fearing the Lord in every area of our life? Are we helping our family understand that principle of wisdom, of fearing the Lord? And are we helping our congregations help us understand the principle of truly make decisions based on the fear of the Lord? And our communities, and could we model that and exemplify that and demonstrate how well it is and how pleasing it is and how much joy it is to live our lives in the fear of the Lord, and how much benefit we're experiencing to cause and entice others, the rest of the nation, that this is the way to live. This is the wise way to live, God's way. And it begins with the fear of the Lord. We may be passionate about our nation passing the right laws and doing the right thing, but my question is how are we demonstrating how we are living? Are we truly living in the fear of the Lord in every area of our life, to where it can be enticing for others to say, I want Jesus Christ working in my life like he's working in yours, because I see the wisdom of God on you, and I see the benefits that it is bringing into your life. God is saying it is these things that are going to exalt a nation. It is this kind of living that's going to bring a health and a healing and a restoration and a prosperity to your nation. It is the righteousness exalts a nation. In chapter 15, I see again a few themes here. He says in verses 1, 2, 4, 7, 23, and 30 that we again see that we are to think about the power of our words and how they affect. Here's something very specifically. How are our words affecting people's soul? Now, we know we've talked about the power of our words in different contexts, in different ways, but think about how our words are impacting people's soul. He says in verse 1 of chapter 15, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It is the tongue of the wise that adorns knowledge, but the mouth of fools gushes folly. In verse 4, he says, the soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. He says in verse 7, the lips of the wise spread knowledge, but the hearts of fools are not upright. In verse 23, he says, a person finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word. And in verse 30, light in a messenger's eyes brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the bones. Again, we see this theme of how our words are impacting people's soul. How does it impact their mind, how they feel, their emotions? How does it weigh? Are our words bringing life to someone's soul, or is it weighing them down? In verse 1, he says the power of our words can bring a gentle answer or a harsh answer. And that is going to either resolve a conflict or it's going to stir up conflict. He says in verse 2 that wise words adorns knowledge. It will embrace knowledge. It will highlight knowledge. But it is the fools that will actually despise knowledge. I love in verse 4 that he says our words are like a tree of life, that it's producing something in someone's life. How are our words bringing life to someone's heart, to someone's spirit, to someone's faith, to someone's dreams? Or is it the foolish words that are crushing someone's life, crushing their dreams? Think about how our words are affecting people's soul. He says in verse 7 that it is the words of the wise that spread knowledge. Man, we need more people that are actually not just talking about people or talking about events, but actually educating people, bringing knowledge, sharing insight that's lifting people's life, whether in the business world, whether in the educational realm, whether it's in the faith realm, in our spiritual realm, that when we speak with wisdom, it's actually knowledgeable. In verse 23, he talks about how joy will come when our conversations and our replies are full of wisdom. A timely word, he says, a timely word. You can discern where people are at and allowing wisdom to give you the right words to say in what are people dealing with in this moment. Like how you say something is so important. And when you say it is so key and crucial, and wisdom will give us the ability to know how to speak a timely word. And he says in verse 30 that timely word can be a good message that will bring joy and health to people. Not only joy to their soul, but even affect the health of their body. Man, we want to use our words to affect people's soul in the right way. We see another theme in chapter 15 through verses 5, 10, 12, 31, and 32. He says, a fool spurns a parent's discipline, but whoever heeds correction shows prudence. And in verse 10, he says, stern discipline awaits anyone who leaves the path, and the one who hates correction will die. And in verse 12, he says, mockers resent correction, so they avoid the wise. And in verse 31, he says, whoever heeds life, giving correction, will be at home among the wise. And 32, those who disregard discipline despise themselves, but the one who heeds correction gains understanding. He says in verse 12 that mockers resent correction, and they avoid wise people. Like you will not see a wise person and a foolish person, mockers, scorners, people who are cynical, hanging out with each other. Not for long. Because one, it's too big of a contrast. There's two different ways of life. They're going in two opposite directions. And not only, it could be even conviction that it is the foolish or the mocker or the scorner is convicted by the fear of the Lord that the wise person is living. And we see this connection with verse 31, where receiving life-giving correction will bring life to someone, and that they will be at home with the wise. Like there's something about being in the right group that is seeking God. The fear of the Lord is guiding their life, making their decisions, and helping them with the desires of their heart, that when you're in that group, you feel at home with the wise. And the opposite of that is true, that when you're around people who are mockers and scoffers and cynics and people who gossip and lie and going down a different path, you just feel uncomfortable. There's something wrong about this setting. Verse 32, he says, disregarding discipline is to despise ourselves. Like if we don't want to be challenged, if we don't want to be corrected, we're actually despising our own life. Because again, we're building something with our life, and wisdom helps us build that kind of life. And in verse 14, he says, the discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. I believe these verses actually connect with the previous verses there, that he's again saying that discerning heart, like when you're walking in wisdom, you will want a discerning heart. You're going to seek out knowledge. You want to know, and you want clarity for your life and clarity on the decisions that you're making and what are they going to bring into your life. In verse 19, he says, the way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. He says that the lazy person is limited, a path of thorns. That's going to be frustrating. You're going, why can't I get to success? Why can't I fight through this path and get where I need to be? Because laziness will never lead to a path of success. It's going to be difficult. Laziness will be a path of difficulty, one after another, day after day, season after season. Laziness will never get you where you want to truly be. But on the other hand, the upright, the good at heart, the ones who desire to do what's right, to live a disciplined life, that their path will be like a highway. It's going to lead you to a path of success, a highway that will bring incredible success into your life. I think a good connection with verse 19 is verse 22. He says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Like if you desire to want to know wisdom and to know how to find success in whatever plans or whatever adventure that you have, is that you will seek out people who have wisdom. You'll ask for advice. You will not be stubborn or hard-headed and think that you know everything, that you're going to bring other people around and ask for their opinion, that is wisdom. But it's the fool who does life alone. I'm just going to figure it out my own self. That will never lead to success. Your plans will fail. But if you embrace other people's opinions and advice, especially ones who are living a right way, and that you see that their life is blessed, they are succeeding at some things, bring them in, ask them questions. And God is showing us that that kind of wisdom will lead us to success. These last three verses in chapter 15, I believe, are so crucial. I think this is so important to what God is showing us about wisdom, and that how the fear of the Lord is so important to our life. He says in verse 3, the eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. He says in verse 25, the Lord tears down the house of the proud, but he sets the widow's boundary stones in place. And in verse 33, wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. In verse 3, he is emphasizing that the eyes of the Lord are everywhere, on the good and the bad, on the wicked and on the just, on those who are trying their best to live in a good way, and on those who are living their life carelessly. God sees everything. And that should actually provoke this fear of the Lord, this honor, this respect that we have for God, because he is looking at everything. In fact, by the way, he says that he is keeping watch. Like that sounds to me like he's keeping record. He is very diligent about every detail. That ought to promote this fear and reverence and honor for God, because his eyes is everywhere. For those who are doing right, for those who are doing their best, they're trying to live right and honorable before God, that it should give us confidence and bring some joy to us that, hey, we may do things in secret. We may not do things for show to get promotions and accolades, but we're going to do the right thing whether someone's watching or not. And here's what we do know, that God is always watching and he's keeping track, and that God is always one who rewards, and he's going to bring a reward for us who are doing the right thing. Like God's eyes are everywhere, and he's keeping watch in everything that we do. In verse 25, again, he's referencing how our life is building this house, but it is pride that will cause our house to come down. Your life will fall apart when we live our life full of pride. And in verse 33, he is urging us that wisdom is compelling us to fear the Lord. Live your life in fearing God. Care what God cares about. Love what God loves. Hate what God hates. Care about how you decide what you're going to do, choices that you make. Live your life in this fear. And that will actually help us live this life in humility. In fact, we cannot live in the fear of the Lord without humility. And if we live in humility, humility comes first, he says, and then honor. That you will have a life of honor if you live your life in humility. Solomon is coming back to this principle of fearing the Lord. That is the foundation for everything in our life. That we focus on living our life in the fear of the Lord, this respect, this honor, that we care about what God cares about. We focus on what God is focusing on, that we honor what God is honoring, that we hate what God is hating, that we love what God is loving. And before I form beliefs, before I make a choice, before I make decisions, before I choose my path in life, it's going to come back to one question: how does this decision reflect my honor and respect for God? Guys, and if we live our life this way, Solomon is telling us it is the fear of the Lord that is the beginning of wisdom and the beginning of knowledge. That we will live a life full of wisdom and knowledge, and we will make wise choices when the fear of the Lord is our foundation.